What if the real threat to your freedom isn't chaos, but order? He taught the world that freedom fails not in chaos, but in concentrated power. For most of history, people feared disorder more than anything and believed the cure was simple. Give someone enough power to keep everyone else in line. A king, a party, a council of wise men, someone strong enough to restore order. But what if the real danger isn't too little power at the center? It's too much. In this chapter of Foundations of Liberty, we turn to a quiet French judge who changed how free societies think about power itself. His name was Charles-Louis de Montesquieu, and he didn't lead armies or start revolutions. He watched, studied, and asked a simple, dangerous question. If humans are flawed, why would we ever trust unchecked power in anyone's hands? His answer became a blueprint for constitutional government, not by making people better, but by arranging power so even their flaws are forced to work for liberty instead of against it. A judge watching power. Montesquieu was born into privilege in early 18th century France and inherited both a noble title and a judgeship in a powerful court. On paper, it was a comfortable life, but in reality it gave him a front-row seat to how power really worked. He watched royal officials issue decrees that could change lives overnight and saw how the law could be sharp with the weak and strangely soft with the well-connected. The problem wasn't that every judge was corrupt or every official was a villain. The deeper problem was what happened when power had too few limits and too little accountability. From his courtroom, he saw something dangerous. The law could become less like a neutral rule and more like a tool in the hands of those who already had power. So he began to ask a different kind of question. Instead of asking, who should rule, the king, the nobles, or the people? He asked, how is power arranged, and what keeps it from swallowing everything? His great work, The Spirit of the Laws, was not just about rules on paper. It was about the hidden structure of government. He believed the invisible architecture of power shapes the real lives of ordinary people more than any slogan or speech. And at the center of that architecture was one conviction. If you want to protect freedom, don't just pick a ruler. Build a structure that no one can easily bend to their will. When all power becomes one power. To explain that structure, Montesquieu broke government down into three basic powers. First, there is the legislative power, the power to make laws and decide what is allowed and what is forbidden. Second, there is the executive power, the power to carry out the laws, command armies, run the administration, and enforce decisions. Third, there is the judicial power, the power to interpret the laws and apply them to real disputes between real people. In many governments of his day, these powers were tangled together. The king influenced the courts. The elites who wrote the rules often enforced them, and the boundaries between making, enforcing, and judging law were blurry. Montesquieu saw a simple but terrifying pattern in that blur. If the same person or group makes the laws and enforces them, they can write rules that favor themselves and crush their opponents. If the same people enforce the laws and judge them, they can punish their enemies and then call it justice. And if all three powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, collapse into one will, there is nothing left to stand between the citizen and the state. No neutral referee, no independent court, no rival institution with the strength to say, stop. Montesquieu's warning was clear. When all power is fused together, tyranny is not an accident, it is the natural outcome. Liberty doesn't usually vanish in a single dramatic moment. It is slowly squeezed out as each check on power is weakened, ignored, or absorbed. So for Montesquieu, the question was no longer, how do we find a perfect ruler, but how do we design a system where no ruler can easily become absolute? The architecture of liberty. Montesquieu's answer was separation of powers, and not just on a chart, but in real, living institutions. Give the legislative branch the authority to make laws, but bind it with procedures, debate, and representation. Give the executive branch the energy to act, but bind it to laws it did not write and cannot simply ignore. Give the judicial branch independence, so it can apply the law fairly even when powerful people dislike the outcome. Then go one step further and give each branch real tools to resist the others. Let legislators investigate and restrain the executive when needed. Let the executive veto or slow, reckless laws that threaten stability or liberty. Let judges refuse to apply acts that violate a higher law, a constitution that even lawmakers must obey. To some people, this system sounded clumsy and inefficient. Wouldn't it be better, they asked, to have one clear center of authority that can act decisively and cut through all the debate? Montesquieu turned that complaint on its head. Liberty, he argued, is not protected when government can act quickly and easily. It is protected when government must argue with itself before it acts. The friction between branches is not a flaw, it is a safeguard. It forces compromise, exposes abuses, and slows down the rush to do something simply because the moment is heated and emotions are high. Montesquieu knew this system would not end all injustice or magically produce perfect leaders, but he believed that with the right structure, even flawed leaders could be prevented from doing limitless harm. In his hands, freedom stopped being just a feeling or a promise. It became an architecture made of institutions, powers, and restraints. His legacy and our choice. Montesquieu's ideas did not stay in France. They crossed oceans and entered the minds of people trying to build new governments. Across the Atlantic, American revolutionaries designing a republic read the spirit of the laws closely. They debated and disagreed on many things, but on one point they found powerful guidance in Montesquieu. A free people needs separated powers and strong checks to keep liberty safe in the long run. The American Constitution did not copy Montesquieu word for word, but his fingerprints are all over its design. A legislature to make laws, an executive to enforce them, courts to interpret them, all bound together by a written constitution. Today it is easy to treat all this as normal, as just how government works. Montesquieu would remind us that this structure was a deliberate choice and a fragile achievement. It was a bet that liberty survives not by trusting the right people with vast power, but by dividing power among institutions that must constantly hold each other in check. That brings us to our own time. When people are frustrated with gridlock, corruption, or conflict, a tempting voice returns. Give more power to someone strong enough to fix it. Trust this leader, this party, this movement. Just let them act. Montesquieu's warning echoes across the centuries. The more you concentrate power, the more fragile your freedom becomes. Yes, checks and balances can be slow, separation of powers can be messy, and arguments between branches can be exhausting. But often that mess is the sound of liberty still breathing. When institutions push back on each other and no one can simply command and be obeyed, that is not the end of order. That is order restrained by justice. Montesquieu never claimed that constitutional structures would save us from every danger. He simply showed that without them, we are almost certain to lose what we claim to cherish. Freedom does not only die in riots or revolutions, it dies quietly when power no longer has to argue with power. So every generation faces a choice. Will we trade the slow, frustrating work of balanced power for the quick comfort of concentrated power? Or will we protect the architecture of liberty that men like Montesquieu labored to design, so that no one, not king, not party, not majority, can ever become the master of all? In the end, the balance of power is not just a theory in a book. It is the line that stands between free citizens and subjects. The fight for liberty never ends. It only changes hands.